Welcome back to the Rise Over Run podcast. I'm Doug Barnett. I'm here with my partner and co-founder, Brant Choate.
What's up?
We are going to have an interesting discussion today, hopefully. I mean, I'm always surprised when people say they listen to this. Yeah, so we're going to try. Recently, I've been kind of popping my head up out of the dirt here publicly. And for the very first time, I kind of spoke publicly since we started Remi. We participated in an event hosted by Tyler Jennings called Reference Group. The philosophy of Tyler's events are basically you are the conglomeration basically of the 5 people you hang around with the most. So if you're looking for people to push you forward, like he wants to create a place where people can find new people to do that for them, which is a pretty honorable thing. I spoke, I didn't speak, he interviewed me for about an hour. I did not have a shortage of things to say. I rarely do. And then in a job interview this week, I had a candidate kind of say like, you're very opinionated. Like you're very direct in what you say. And I think a lot of this comes from, we've been really heads down building Remi for almost 3 years now.
Yeah.
And you kind of like have to begin to form opinions about the way you want to build your company because it can't be everything. And I've talked about this before, like trade-offs matter and you see them every day. You don't even maybe realize them, but if you one of the easiest ones is just to take Target versus Walmart. And they're very good at different things. Walmart's lighting is garbage. Their merchandising is awful. You don't feel good when you're in the store, but you feel good when you're checking out because their prices are very good. Compared to Target where, it's almost a joke on TikTok that women love shopping at Target. And it's almost like going to the amusement park and they really love it. And you pay for that. And they're distinct trade-offs that are specific to the strategy. And so, Brant, does it surprise you that people kind of are listening to this podcast, listening to us speak, and they're kind of like, wow, you guys are really opinionated?
No. I think, I think if you're, trying to make sense of, the world in any way, shape, or form, you're sitting listening to people like us and kind of thinking in the back of your head, like, how are they so sure? Or what makes them qualified to, speak in front of people or whatever? And, why do their opinions matter and all this type of stuff? And I think both of us have kind of been around long enough to know that the alternative to the approach we've taken, which is having strong opinions, is trying to be everything to everyone or having no opinion or trying to play both sides all the time. And in my mind, trying to play both sides is the quickest path to being unhappy in your life.
Trying to please everyone.
Yeah. And, especially when you're trying to do the harder something is and the more, you have to involve other people, and especially if they're going to follow you, you probably should have clarity in the way that you talk. And that requires strong opinions and strong decisions. And all of this stuff is kind of inherently about trade-offs, like you're mentioning, between Target and Walmart.
Yep. I don't think, unless you've kind of lived this, and John Collison and Patrick Collison talk about this quite a bit. I saw a quote by Steve Jobs on Twitter this week that also talked about this, that essentially everything that exists in this world has to be designed. Every single thing. It's not just there. Someone decided to make it exactly the way that it is, which requires you to make a decision. And to make a decision, you have to come up with the way you think about things and the way you see the world. And when you're starting a business from nothing, like literally inventing it from nothing, every single decision has to be made. And you kind of get into this routine of being used to that, making decisions, forming opinions. And let's take the remote work opinion or the work in the office opinion that Remi has. What a lot of people didn't see is you and I sitting in a basement across 2 IKEA tables talking for, how many hours would you say we've talked about remote work versus in person?
Like, I don't know, 100? A lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. And very early on, when there was no one else, it was just a few people, we were trying to figure out how to be a remote company. Why? What was the main reason that we wanted to be a remote company?
Talent.
Talent. Super easy. It's like, are there enough, if we're going to be a really good software company, are there enough talented engineers in the state of Utah to do that? And one of the initial theses was like, maybe not. And especially early on, trying to get people to join us, it was probably easier to recruit them overseas. But the problem was, we hated remote work.
Hated it.
Absolutely, we just didn't like it. Everything about it. Like, it's funny because we just had our Christmas party, and I was talking to one of our employees whose friend came with her to the party, and she's like, you know, I always say that I love my remote job, but wow, that was so fun coming. Is that what work is like for you guys all the time? Yeah, it is. And we just got to an opinion, not because we don't understand that remote work doesn't have its upsides. It does. Of course it does. But we decided what we wanted and the reasons that we valued it and how we would leverage the strengths that it provides. And you can kind of go down the decision tree of all the decisions that we've made. And it's not that they're the only decision, but because we've arrived at that decision, we actually have a very well-formed opinion about how we got to that place. I just think that the last 5 years was a period of time that I think people will look back on not fondly. And that period of time was marked by people being so afraid to say what they really thought because they thought they would be canceled.
Yeah.
And I want to move on from that period of time as fast as I possibly can.
I think, there's some group of people with good intentions that started out trying to kind of like make a difference on important issues. But the whole thing was quickly co-opted by, I don't even know how to categorize the group as a whole, but like this movement to like, not exclude anybody and be inclusive, I always found really strange because basically at the root of any decision you make in life, it is exclusionary.
That's literally what it is.
It's a trade-off.
Yep.
Like whatever you decided not to do, opportunity cost, however you want to frame it, you're excluding something. So like, yeah, maybe it feels good to say, we're inclusive to everyone and everything, but that like was not true, really. Like, it was inclusivity as long as you agreed with them. So like, if you were religious, for example, if like the wrong religion, you weren't part of this inclusivity. If you didn't hold the right political opinions, on and on and on and on. So it was sort of like double speak in my mind, where it's like, hey, we're inclusive, but also not. And at the end of the day, everyone is exclusive in some way.
Yep.
It's like that is what makes your personality and who you are. You choose to spend time and focus and energy on certain things, and you exclude everything else. And so in the context of business, I think, it's interesting to break down like what happens downstream of working for a company or a set of leaders in which they have to try and appeal to as many people as possible, as many different viewpoints as possible, and never truly state their own feelings or opinions. And like, what happens? Like, if you're an average employee, like, what happens if you're one of those employees?
You're one of the employees that's excluded?
No. That like you're working in a company like that.
Oh, well, I can tell you, you feel like you're in a ship with no rudder. That's what it feels like. It feels like you're just floating across the sea wherever the wind takes you. At least that's what I felt. This is one of the reasons that I decided to be an entrepreneur, is the last leader of the company that I worked for made decisions by committee, and we didn't make decisions, ever. Just kind of sailed away, and it was not what I wanted to be a part of.
I think if you break down like one individual person's day, and especially if you're just like an individual contributor in a company, which I think statistically most people are.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, that's what you'd want. You know, you're waking up and you have a set of things that you're trying to juggle around in your limited capacity in your mind that might include, you know, what you're gonna eat, what you're gonna say to your spouse, your kids, whatever. They have all kinds of concerns that, you know, you need to balance. And then throughout any given day at work, there's hundreds and hundreds of decisions you're making. And if at every point and every decision you make, you have to consider some like overly complex, you know, branching logic, so to speak, of what you can say, what you can do, and more or less like what success looks like, people just don't do anything.
By the way, you just described corporate PR strategy. It's exactly how it happened.
Yeah.
It becomes word lasagna, and they don't say anything.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it's happened. And you can see, it's like, how many people read this press release? I don't know, 12 probably. And every single one put their little things like, well, this could be offensive, and this could be offensive. And it just, out the other side, if you look at like, now what's starting to happen is you're getting, I think leaders just are like, I'm done with this. Like, take Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir. That guy saying the things that he says on a regular basis 5 years ago would have been like it would have felt like lightning strikes every single time he speaks. But when I listen to him speak, I'm like, that's a leader I want to go work for, because he's a very clear opinion, knows exactly what he's going after, and it's okay that it's not perfect, because at least it's going in a direction. And it was actually the Steve Jobs quote about this that made me leave my last job and become an entrepreneur. He basically said, I actually like it when we make mistakes, because that means we're making decisions, and that's better than not making decisions, because very few mistakes are one-way streets. And you're right, what ends up happening is if people have all this lasagna, this decision-making tree that they kind of have, it's basically paralysis is what ends up happening. And so one of the things that I would say to anybody listening to this, it's like, well, how do I get opinions? How do I form these opinions? What would you say to them, Brant?
I think some amount of it is just having the courage to like say what you're thinking in any given context. And, you know, if it's not something you're doing regularly, there can sometimes be like consequences. I guess even if you do say them regularly, there's consequences. You kind of just have to get comfortable with the fact that, you know, when you express yourself, not everyone will agree. And that's just like statistics. If everyone agreed with each other, like, I don't know, we'd all be robots or something. Like, this is not possible.
It's super boring too.
Yeah, boring. And then I think, you know, part of like developing opinions, or you could call it taste, is tasting a lot of things.
Or making mistakes.
Making mistakes, yeah.
Making some decisions.
Yeah.
Put yourself in a position in some way, I don't know, make a Pinewood Derby car. Like, just put yourself in some decisions in a place where you have to make some decisions and live with them.
Yeah, like maybe said another way, like having skin in the game in some way, I think is a pretty useful feedback mechanism to develop opinions. And I think at least the way I think about it is, over time you develop this set of feedback that is unique to you and allows you to then go kind of say, hey, I know from my like, you know, limitations and how my brain works, that if I do X, Y, Z, and I kind of tell the people around me to do X, Y, Z, the likelihood of getting the outcome that we're all after is 75% or whatever. And I kind of think in terms of like this, probability model ongoing, and you're never going to be 100%. But I think the more you do this, the more you kind of, hit more than you miss.
Yep.
And I think as long as that's true, people around you are willing to listen to you.
I think that this is an important skill to develop. We like to say around here, like, strong opinions loosely held. The reason that I like this approach, and this is one of the things, I've talked about this on this podcast before, that I have taken criticism for at work, is there were senior leaders of the last company that would get very upset because I would say my opinion loudly. And they're like, he says everything as if it's fact. So I had to begin to communicate to, like, I can be moved off these opinions, but I'm going to be the first one to speak. I'm going to be the one that's willing to kind of put my neck out and say, like, this is what I'm thinking. I just saw this video from Jeff Bezos where he would talk about meetings and how he wanted messy meetings at Amazon. And so what they would do is they would go read their 6-pagers for the first 30 minutes of the meeting. And then the second 30 minutes, they would have robust discussion. And he said he could tell when his leaders had rehearsed the meeting. But what he wanted, when he says, I want a messy meeting, what is he saying? I want opinions given, and then I want to argue. And that's exactly what I want. I want opinions to be given, and finding your voice is a hard thing for especially early career people to find, because you don't have a lot of the experience that's kind of needed to kind of find your voice. And so having this maybe other places to go work on this muscle, I think is a really important thing.
Because I actually think there's a very reasonable or logical reason that people are afraid to do this, or that they like maybe hide, or whatever, however you want to say it. In that, if you have someone in a meeting who every time they say something says something stupid, then we eject them from the meeting eventually.
Yes, we do.
Like, that will happen. It's not that there's no consequences. There are.
There are.
But it's just like, figuring out that ratio. And I think what it comes down to over time is like developing discernment. Like, how strong should I come in with this opinion? How much should I push on this specific leader or this person? And how should I do that? There's nuance in approaching all this, and it's unique even down to like the individuals you're working with. Like, I know that when we're in an executive meeting, the way that I need to deliver something to, you versus Reno it's just different. And it's just based on your guys' personalities. And if you're like junior and or cynical towards the world, what tends to happen is you watch or you attempt or whatever one of these, okay, I'm gonna toss my opinion out there. And I find like I've been waiting to like try this, and I finally do it. And it's like the first time I've done it in 1 month. And then someone's like, okay, cool, whatever. And they brush past it, and you're just like, see, no one cares about my opinions or whatever. And like, it just takes time to get to the point where, opinions that you have are gonna get listened to, unless you just happen to be a genius. But there's not very many of those people.
That's right. Which is why, we've talked about this so often on this podcast, but actually learning about yourself and what you like and the interests that you have and all those things are important, because usually those things are easy to become an expert on. It's easy to like really be passionate, because if you're more passionate about something than everyone else, you're going to know more about it than everyone else. It's kind of how it works. And then once you're more knowledgeable, it's very easy to share opinions that are worthwhile and that people take seriously and that they'll listen to. And but when you are trying to be everything to everyone, you're not credible, because you're probably not even passionate about the thing you're arguing for. You're just doing it to share an opinion and to like, okay, I'm going to scarily raise my hand this one time. We've seen this a lot, even in our own business, of trying to help people early on develop some of this taste. By the way, for founders or people that are, in hiring positions, This is why if you cannot hire a nihilistic or a cynic person in your organization, or it just becomes an I told you so culture, or like rooting for failure, because they are just laughing at the people around them for having an opinion and making a decision. It's just the opposite of success.
If you think about the job of scaling a company, I always think about like this concept of signal versus noise, and it's that like there's no possible way we can be involved in every single decision that happens down on the ground level floor. Like even already, our company's not that large, but I can't read every line of code. I can't, help place every single pixel on a design and so on and so on. And so we have to be able to come up with like, fairly high level principles, decisions, goals, send the signal down and have it stay like a strong signal down to, an individual employee as they work daily and understand like what to do. But if you have people, like you're saying, somewhere along the way that, are afraid or they're cynical or whatever, you lose the signal. They won't make the decisions because, at each layer to like make the work happen and on the goals that we need, there's like all of these decisions that need to happen. And you can see this play out with people that struggle with this. Like, we'll all be in a meeting and it's like, okay, based on the company goal, we need to do this project. How long is it going to take? Oh, I don't know. How are we supposed to know? And it's like, what are all the people downstream of you supposed to do? And the signal dies there, or gets weakened. And like your likelihood of having success at scale of the company diminishes because the signal cannot make it down clearly to, your individual employees.
Through the noise.
Yeah.
I'm listening to you talk and I'm like, this is all related to, I think why Brian Chesky is like inserting himself back into the details of Airbnb the last few years is the right to have opinions and to make decisions it's not given. It is mostly earned through your reputation, the things that you've done, and the things you're willing to stick your neck out for, the willingness to sit in a meeting and commit to a date and then hit the date, do what you say you're going to do, etc. And I think this is also an interesting thing to think about. I think the breaking point for many people of why they become entrepreneurs is they probably get opinionated to the certain point where they're tired of listening to whoever they have to listen to in the company it like pushes them over the edge to like, okay, I'm just ready to have my own opinions and march to the beat of my own drum, which is great. That's like there's lots of different ways to do things and lots of different ways to succeed. We really respect James Hawkins, the founder of PostHog. We see the world very differently than him. That's okay. So I think the last piece here is that's kind of interesting to think about is what's happened to credentials the last handful of years, maybe 2 handfuls of years.
They've lost a lot of meaning.
They have lost a lot of meaning. And the people with them do not like that they've lost a lot of meaning. Why has that happened? Because those people are sharing opinions.
Yeah.
And they're saying, well, the reason, everything we've talked about, I have the experience, I have the knowledge, you should listen to what I have to say. And by the way, because I am credentialed and I went to Harvard or Yale or Berkeley and I am a PhD, you don't know as much as me. So listen to what I have to say.
I think that the institutions, if we're talking about academics, and it probably applies to like 3-letter agencies or whatever, you want to talk about in terms of credentials, they've all been caught up, well, most have been caught up in this game of trying to be everything to everyone. And they've started to like lack a real true opinion in the world. And thus, like, if you go to these organizations, in my mind, you don't really learn enough of any one given opinion or discipline enough to then go be useful to anybody. So yeah, I could pop out the other end of Harvard knowing how to kind of be like a master politician, trying to be everything to everyone. But if you put someone like that down into a company, they ruin the company. It's just what we were just talking about. They dilute the signal of what needs to happen so much that anyone underneath them or around them doesn't actually move in any given direction.
It's interesting to think about that, diluting the signal. You know, as always, the most extreme case is Elon. That XAI, he took 5 minutes with every single builder in the company. Tell me what you're working on, and I'll give you feedback. That's one way to get rid of the noise. Just go direct to the source.
No, and you have to, like, I think, because more or less, like what we're saying, if you're, you know, at the top or you're somewhere in the middle, you're imperfectly at all times trying to figure out how to, like, get that signal to go down as far as possible, as clearly as possible, but it's just guessing. Like, we're just coming up with goals and principles and, you know, whatever, and you hope that of the 30,000 decisions that someone makes in a day on average, that they do most of them the way that you hope. You can't know for sure until you, like, go down to the kind of bottom of the information chain and actually check it, talk to them.
Yeah, and even if you're not a fan, or if you're just a leader, you've got to get in the details of the work, which is why, like, on our leadership team, we hired the senior people first, with no direct reports usually, or very few. What does that mean? They have to be able to do and be willing to do the actual work, and it's once again signal versus noise. If they're willing to do that and they actually like doing that, it's a very clear signal to me that they're the type of person that we would like to work at Remi. And so if you find yourself, you're thinking about your career development and who you want to become, and management is like the goal, you should relook at that. That's not a great goal. And I meet with lots of people in these interviews, and I ask them what their goals are. Like, what do you want the future to look like in 3 to 5 years? And I encounter a lot of people early on in their career going, I'd really like to lead. I'd really like to manage a team. Now, I think that's an honorable idea, and I know why, because we've been taught that doing the work is the lowest part of the value chain. We just don't agree with that. Doing the work is the value. Most, I would say basically all of the best leaders that I know are reluctant managers. Very reluctant.
Neither of us wanted direct reports.
It's the least favorite part. It's my least favorite. It's actually, I feel very privileged in this sense that I get to work with people who mostly manage themselves, 95%. Because of this, I don't want to manage in the very, very small details. I want to be in the work. As an example, today, like, I spent a good portion of my day thinking about our January and February numbers, how the sales team was going to interact with that, how we needed to go impact our lead funnel, et cetera. And then working on comp plans with Reno, who leads our sales function. Like, that's the type of work that that's what you want to be working on. You want to be in the work, listening to calls, talking to customers, meeting with partners, et cetera. So, like, to tie it all the way back, it's not, we're not trying to be opinionated to be combative. I'm really not trying to do it that way. But I do think being willing to present your view of the world and why you believe that is important. And if, you get criticized for that, that's okay too. Like, I've had some opinions about this, and it's about 50-50. 50% of the people agree, 50% of the people don't. That's fine.
But in my mind, it's better that they know up front if they want to come work here or not, based on the opinions that go out.
The more I've thought of this, the smarter it seems to me. But Blake Murray, the founder of Divvy, this is exactly his philosophy. He's like, what I looked for were people that thought like me. That is so counterculture to what most people, it's like, you need a diversity of thoughts and opinions on your team. It's not what he was looking for. He's looking for people because agreement in philosophy meant speed. And speed was the most important thing that he was trying to achieve. And that is a pretty interesting, smart way to think about it. That's pretty counter to the way most people think.
Yeah, and it's not perfect, but I think that our government structure accounts for what everyone was trying to solve with that. Like, there's room enough for organizations to pop up of all different flavors and beliefs that can self-organize and represent the type of company or belief system that they want. And in the aggregate, you have tens of thousands of different organizations that all have to kind of roll up to the way that our government functions, what we vote for, and all that stuff. A government is much more equipped with the ability to make sense of that mess than two dudes in a basement, like trying to, provide a living for their family. Like,
yep.
We don't have time to sit and, think about special interest groups exclusively all day long, which is kind of what it started to feel like.
The last 5 years.
Yeah, if you were a leader.
Totally.
And it's not, like, once again, it's not to say, we don't care about that stuff or that there's no place for it, but I don't think a company is the right place in almost every situation to really like make a change in those scenarios.
Yep. And props to Brian Armstrong at Coinbase for being the first one to throw his buoy into the water and jump.
Yeah.
That took a lot of guts and a lot of first principles thinking. And you've seen mostly everybody now following suit. Even Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, kind of said this on Twitter the other day. And I said it in an interview, and I was like, words are empty. See what actions are. The takeaway that I would have, hopefully from this discussion, if you've listened, is go center in on some things that you can form opinions about, that you can be knowledgeable about, and begin to make an impact in your area of work that you're working on. Because I promise you, the leaders that you're working with, if they're any good, they want you to be opinionated. They want you to begin to add context and add understanding to a topic and make it easier to provide speed to the organization to move forward. I think it's not just opinionated to be opinionated. There's real reason behind it. Thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you guys on the flip.
See ya.